Descriptive linguistics. Our today's topic is structural or descriptive linguistics. This school of thought emerged in the 20th century and it deals with languages at particular points in time, which is also called synchronic study of language. So we can say that descriptive linguistics studies languages at particular points in time, that is synchronically rather than diachronically. What is diachronic? That if we study a language throughout its historical development, that would be called diachronic study of that language. The father of modern structural linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure, believed in language as a systematic structure, serving a link between sound and thought. According to him, or he thought of language sounds as a series of linguistic signs that are purely arbitrary, as can be seen in the linguistic signs or words for horse. Like in German, Turkish, French, and Russian, and many other languages, we have different terms or we have different signs, different sounds for signifying the same one singular organism, which is horse. So the claim of Saussure is very much right over here, that these signs or these sounds are arbitrary and are purely agreed by the community or by the people who are speaking that particular language. In the previous slide, we have discussed descriptive linguistics. Now let's talk about its historical development. In America, a structural approach was continued through the efforts of Franz Boas and Edward Sapir. They worked primarily with Native American languages, and the third name who was putting efforts in this field was Leonard Bloomfield, whose methodology required that non-linguistic criteria must not enter a structural description. Rigorous procedures for determining language structure were developed by Kenneth Pike, Bernard Bloch, Charles Pocket, and many other scholars. So what is the core principle of descriptive linguistics? The core principle of structural or descriptive linguistics is that each language constitutes an autonomous system which must be described in its own terms, right? Each language constitutes or has an autonomous system which must be described in its own terms, in the very own terms of that particular language. Modern descriptive linguistics carry out detailed empirical surveys on a language. After collecting language samples from speakers, they analyze the data so as to identify the components of the system and the principles that underlie its organization. Like, they conduct surveys, they collect data from speakers, from native speakers of that language, and then analyze the data to identify the basic components of that linguistic system and the principles that underlie its organization. Through its commitment to the empirical description of speakers' actual practices and to the diversity of languages and creations of linguistic communities, descriptive linguistics is closely allied with the social sciences. The research agenda of descriptive linguistics can be contrasted with a number of related yet distinct approaches to language. So what are we going to study in this over here, in this, especially in this slide? What point is focused is the contrast or the distinguishing features or the differences of descriptive linguistics from other approaches or studies of or branches of linguistics. First of all, let's see how anthropological linguistics and sociolinguistics they contrast with descriptive linguistics. Anthropological and sociolinguistics, both of these branches of linguistics or approaches to linguistics, they study the interaction between cultural or social factors and language use. Whereas descriptive linguistics focuses on the structural properties of the languages themselves. So next is historical linguistics. Historical linguistics studies the diachronic processes of language change. That is, it focuses on the diachronic development or processes of language change with reference to a particular language, whereas descriptive linguistics focuses on the synchronic forms taken by a particular language at a given point in its development. The endeavor to compare individual languages and the search for potential universals is known as linguistic typology. Discourse linguistics may be understood as the preliminary step in the typological effort. That is, the stage or phase at which the facts of each individual language are established before comparing it with another language. First, we have discussed what is linguistic typology. Linguistic typology is the endeavor or the process to compare individual languages and the search for potential universals or universal principles that are common or same in all the languages. The next point, we are discussing descriptive linguistics. Where do descriptive linguistics stand? Descriptive linguistics stands at the preliminary step in the typological effort. That is, it is the stage at which the facts of each individual language are established before comparing it with other languages. These subdisciplines of linguistics differ in their scientific goals, yet they essentially share with descriptive linguistics the same fundamental principles, including the emphasis on a bottom-up empirical approach. Here, by these subdisciplines, we are pointing towards historical sociolinguistics, historical linguistics, and anthropological linguistics that we discussed in the previous slide. That they differ in the scientific goals, yet they essentially share with descriptive linguistics the same fundamental principles. By contrast, the principles of descriptive linguistics conflict more frontally with those of formal linguistics. Formal linguists, particularly those who are proponents of generative grammar, they claim that the facts of language are best explained by resorting to an apparatus of theoretical principles that are defined as a priori. Resorting to an apparatus of theoretical principles means that the theoretical principles can explain a language to its best, independently of the facts of particular languages. That is, they do not consider the other facts of particular or individual languages. Whereas descriptivists, they reject these a prioristic assumptions and require that all results be derived from the observable structures of languages themselves. Observable structures that are being practiced by the language communities or linguistic communities.